Hi all, welcome to Asianet News Samvad. This is a unique talk show which will be aired on all channels and digital platforms of Asianet News Network, and we are extremely honored and privileged to have Mr. Abhinav Bindra with us on our opening day, a legend who needs no introduction, India's first individual Olympics champion.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Abhinav, we'll quickly get down to business here. As it happened a few days ago, the OVEP was formally introduced into the Indian sports educational system. So, I'll start with the occasion itself. If you can give us a brief description of what is it all about and how will it impact the sporting culture in the country?
Well, I think, sport, the power of sport goes beyond winning and losing on the field of play. The power of sport really is at the values society at large can imbibe through sport. Sport teaches you a little bit about winning, but sport teaches you how to lose. Sport teaches you integrity. Sport teaches you honesty. Sport teaches you how to set goals and follow those goals. Sport teaches you teamwork. It builds relationships. It teaches you a lot about listening to different points of view. But all in all, what sport can do to our very young society, the potential is absolutely immense. Not all of our citizens will go and compete at the Olympic Games, but I think each citizen of this country can do well and benefit a great deal from living the philosophy of Olympism. And that exactly is what the OVEP is directed towards. It is an experiential learning program for the youth. As a nation, we're all after economic success, and it's very interesting to note that all the greatest economies of the world also happen to be great sporting superpowers. And I do believe that they have become great economic powers because sport has played a very important role in the foundation of that society. And that is how, in a humble way, we've started with Odisha, where we're doing a pilot to start off with in the first year for about 100 schools. And then based on the results and the impact the pilot creates, the vision at least is to imbibe it into the state education board, which in turn would then impact 7 million kids of that state. But we also have to ensure we do not build a toxic culture for sport. When I talk about building a toxic culture for sport, it can very easily happen that we do that when we get totally one-dimensional and focused on winning. In sport, winning is very important, but winning is not the only thing. And that is where we must add a lot of values to what sport can do to society on a whole. At an Olympic Games, you have 10,000 athletes who compete. Only 300 of those athletes go back home with gold medals. What are the rest? They're not losers, right? They gain a lot from sport. And in terms, when we actively try and build a culture for sport, we have to ensure that we attach enough values to the softer elements that sport can do and how sport can really shape our society.
Abhinav, I found the toxic culture point very interesting. As parents, fans, administrators, I think we need to have a more sensitive and finer understanding of sport and values.
Yeah, I think it's not just about parents. It's about the whole ecosystem that surrounds an athlete, whether it be society, on how they react or overreact when an athlete wins or loses, whether it is the media, if they go hysterical when we win or when it's overly hysterical when we lose. It is about understanding sport to a greater degree and understanding how sport is. Winning on the field of play is important, but it is something can never be guaranteed. When I talk about that toxic culture, we attach too much to winning. We make winning too big, and that is a problem because it's not sustainable.
So the focus should be on the fact that we want more young people to be involved in sport. We want greater depth of talent emerging out of various disciplines.
Say take shooting, for example. We didn't win any medals in the last Olympics or even the Olympics prior. But the depth of talent that exists in that sport is immense in this country, which also is a good indicator that sport, even though has not won medals at the Olympics has developed over the last decade to a great degree. Because if you see the numbers, the quality coming through, now you have a completely fresh team almost a fresh team from what competed at Tokyo, and you have new stars emerging. So all that argues well. So this program will definitely also help increase participation in sport. Elite sport is always a niche world over. You're not suddenly going to get millions and millions of people dedicating 20 years of their life to elite sport. It's not going to happen. But we need those numbers. We need to push those numbers higher. And those numbers will only go higher when there will be more participation into recreational sport. Then an offshoot of more numbers in recreational sport would mean more athletes or more people devoting a long time to pursue excellence in sport. That's what we want to see.
So, Abhinav, speaking about OVP, it started with Odisha right now. What are the next states you're targeting, and how long do you think before it spreads pan-India?
Well, it's not completely dependent on me. It's a humble start. We're just about starting. July will be the semester where it will start. Impact of such a program will not be seen in just a few months. It takes a little while, but there has already been interest received from other states contacting to see what they can do, and that's what it's a conversation which pretty much is in the hands of different states, and the International Olympic Committee, the Abhinav Bindra Foundation is just kind of facilitating it and trying to ensure that the program in India is run at the highest level. So it really depends also on the proactiveness and nimbleness in decision making in various governments, and that differs from state to state, right? I mean, you have some which are very nimble and want to get things done very quickly. Others are a little bit slower in pace. So it really depends on the proactiveness in governments, how they envision it in their state, and then how the IOC also decides to participate in partnering with them.
So, Abhinav, speaking of sports education as a whole, it is yet to be entirely implemented in the Indian schools, and it's still a debatable topic. So, what's your personal take on how long do you think it could take for that goal to be achieved?
How do you define sport education?
Focusing on in different kinds of sports, make it mandatory that you have a sports education class, and children can take part in the sports of their choice, so that they are accustomed to the entire sporting culture and not entirely deprived of it.
Yeah, so I think what you're trying to define is not certainly. It's not real. I mean, it's not education. I think it's about making sure that sport is part and parcel of the holistic development of a child, right? That is what we really want to see. Sporting careers are short. They are 10, 20 years. But we have to ensure that we also make very good citizens of these young kids. And there, I think the experience that they learn from sport will certainly will help that cause. That's what I'd like to see happen.
Abhinav, there was a time when the average Indian athlete was very defensive and written off even before boarding a flight to the Olympic venue. Now we see more fearless, confident athletes, and recently we had our best Olympic Games till date. But our young shooters, despite winning gold in World Championships, World Cups, couldn't perform under pressure. What's your advice to them? What's that single most important ingredient for winning an Olympic medal?
Well, pressure is a funny thing. Nobody can really perform to one's optimum under pressure. If I put you under pressure, I'm sure you'll struggle as well. It's just how human beings are wired. But I think the shooting, as I said, has let's We didn't win at the Olympics in Tokyo, but you have to go beyond that, and you have to look at it more holistically and see how the sport has developed over the last decade. And for sure, the sport has developed. I think what it can further do and further refine is preparation towards an Olympics. I think they erred and made some mistakes in their preparation. And I think that is what that experience of Tokyo should teach the system at large and the young athletes, that the Olympics is not just another competition. It's a very special competition, and the athletes will be under pressure. You cannot escape that pressure. You have to learn to work with that pressure. And that is, I think, the learning. The preparation has to become very precise. There are several elements that have to come together. There's, of course, a skill element which has to be refined. There is a physical element which has to be refined. There is a very important recovery element which has to be refined. There has to be there have to be tactics in preparation as well. That you ensure that, when you are actually at an Olympics, you have your batteries 100%, and you are training that you're at your best form during the period of those 2 weeks. And that is where a scientific approach to training is important. Trying to really focus on that last 1% to get an edge over others. When you go to an Olympics, it's a small competition. A world championship would attract a higher number of participants, but the Olympics will attract a smaller group, but the absolute creme de la creme who participate at the Olympics. And each one of them, or majority of them, are capable of winning on a particular day. So you have to try and get a little bit of an edge in there. Science, technology, engineering, analytics, and medicine, STEAM as I call it, plays a very important role in the overall development of the athlete.
So, Abhinav, what do you think is the biggest challenge that Indian shooting is facing right now?
Well, frankly, I don't know, because I don't follow it so closely. I'm not associated with the inner workings of the preparation of the team. I know I'm as informed as you are. There was a big talk about a change in the coaching part after Tokyo, and I saw recently, after a year after the games, that process has finally happened. So it is a matter of defining the right policies as well, the right selection criteria as well, because you're spoiled for choices a little bit. It's also a little bit of a headache, because then you need to make sure that you have the right selection criteria and the right selection policy to really make sure that you select the right athletes. Make sure that the athletes keep developing. I think that is the challenge.
We have a young team, and of course, young athletes need time.
A 17-year-old is not going to may show potential to be the best in the world and maybe win few world level competitions, but the process of development, it's at a very early stage, right? If a 17-year-old is your main athlete, he or she has only been competing for 2 or 3, 4 years. And in 2 or 3, 4 years, he or she has not fully developed. He or she is in the process of developing. So that, while that has to be ensured that they also develop. It's not you just hop around the world and compete from one competition to the other. You also have to ensure that your team continuously develops in the various elements that I talked about.
So, Abhinav, as you said, you don't follow deeply the sport anymore, but I'd still like to know from you India's chances in the World Championships.
It's a young team. They have the potential to do well. There's no question about that. I think the World Championships also starts the Olympic qualification phase, the quota situation for Paris. And I think that will be an additional thing on the mind of athletes to get that quota place. That is the priority, really. Should be the priority for the athletes. The chances are bright. How much they will win and what they will do, I have no clue. But I'm sure that they are working in the right direction, and the potential that they've shown over the last few years has been very, very positive. So I I only hope good things happen.
Abhinav, despite all these recent achievements, there is an alarming increase in the number of doping cases in our country. Recently, we heard Olympian Anju Bobby George alleging that many Indian athletes are bringing back performance enhancing drugs from abroad.
Yeah, again, it boils down to creating the right environment for sport to develop in this country. I talked so much about creating a toxic environment, and I think we've made winning too big. And when you make winning too big, then athletes are they give whatever it would ask them, and they get very susceptible to even doing things which are banned, which are illegal. So creating the right environment, I think, is very, very important. Making sure that athletes also develop the right values in sport, and that can only happen through proper awareness, through proper education. You said we won 7 medals at the Olympics, but I think on the shame list we're 3rd or 4th in the world, which certainly is not a good thing, and it's not a good sign. And that again talks a little bit, for me personally, talks a little bit about the environment in our country that exists.
As we are aware, organizers of 2026 Commonwealth Games have dropped shooting, archery and wrestling from the list of sporting disciplines, and Indian Olympic Association has lodged a protest against it. What's your take on this?
Well, obviously, I'd like to see my sport represented in the Commonwealth Games. We've historically done well, and it's been part of the Commonwealth Games. But it is about making sure that your sport fits into the realm of things. There has to be a lot of lobbying done by the world body, by the different bodies that rule sport. It is not just so easy that you draft a letter or an email and shoot it off, and tomorrow it will be included, or make a ridiculous suggestion that the games will be held in another continent and hosted them in India. It's never going to be sustainable. That idea which was put forward a couple of years ago, I knew from day one it was just showmanship and utter rubbish. You have to ensure that your sport continues to remain relevant. But even if you look at the Olympic program, you have so many young, youthful urban sports making it to the Olympic Games. So you have to ensure that the sport remains relevant, the sport remains sustainable in terms of cost, in terms of environmental sustainability. And if you ensure that, then the sport is strong enough to, there will be no questions asked. So I think a lot of work needs to be done in that direction. But just shooting off an email here or there, or making some suggestions that, we'll boycott the games, that the other won't help. You have to ensure that, you lobby in the right forums, you speak to the right people, you ensure that the sport in itself stands strong, and work needs to be done in that direction.
Abhinav, you were among the very few to openly talk about the mental health aspect of an athlete. Recently, Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka and a handful of others have opened up about what they were experiencing. But do you think that there is still a long way to go in raising awareness and increasing acceptance?
Well, I think, an athlete's life has been dehumanized to a great degree over the last few years. I think there has been a big misconception that athletes are superhuman and they are kind of immune to any kind of mental health issues. But on the other hand, an athlete's life, is full of insecurities. Perhaps has more red flags and triggers than normal careers have. There is the constant of dealing with pressure. There is a constant about winning. There is a constant about dealing with failure. There is the physiological load just training puts on your body. If you do not recover enough or recover physically enough, it can also have a detrimental role on your mental aspect. There are injuries that an athlete faces. While there are physical injuries, the mental toll an injury has on a career of an athlete is absolutely immense. There's an impending end of a career. There is a career transition out of sport, which is a very difficult transition most athletes have. So there are many elements and red flags in a career and a journey of an athlete. But the bottom line is that, we have to again ensure that the environment is not toxic. And unfortunately, many environments across the world have become toxic because they've made winning too big, and winning the only thing, and pushing the athletes more, and really dehumanizing the athlete. Until and unless you put human well-being at the heart and center of performance, you'll never attain sustainable success. And only when you start to really prioritize the human element of the athlete, the human well-being of the athlete, that is when you will start to prevent mental health issues. Otherwise, athletes will continue to remain very susceptible to different issues.
Even though you are not an active athlete now, you are still part of the Olympic movement as a member of IOC Commission, and it must have been a great matter of pride that you are able to contribute even after your retirement.
Yeah, so I've been a part of the commission for a few years, and tried to contribute to to the greatest extent that I can for the well-being of athletes, to ensure that the athlete remain at the heart and center of the Olympic movement. A lot of my efforts for the Athletes Commission have been directed towards mental health. All the resources that the IOC has put out through the working group on mental health, I've had a direct involvement there, but also on several other projects, on several different areas. I've tried to contribute my best towards that, and in a way it's been a fulfilling experience, an ability to give back to sport at large, and give back to the sporting community at large. It has, at a personal level, also been a very fulfilling time.
I remember immediately after Neeraj Chopra's achievement in Tokyo Olympics, you shared your excitement with us, and now Neeraj is all set for his next big assignment, the World Championship. What's your message to him, especially considering the fact that there will be greater scrutiny and expectations this time?
I'd like to wish him the best. I've had a chance to interact with him a few times, and I think he's a focused young person. And I think, I only try to tell him that, change will always be constant. How he prepared for Tokyo was one way of preparation. Now things have changed in many ways. So constant adaptability in preparation is something which is very important. You talk to yourself about expectations. He'll have to deal with that. There'll be about dealing with external expectations, but also internal expectations. But I think he's a committed person, and I think if he puts in all the effort, which I'm sure he will continue to improve, continue to develop as an athlete. Again, he's a young man, and he's yet to achieve his fullest potential. I hope he continues to improve. We would like to see him cross that 90-meter mark soon, and continuously be one of the strongest contenders at the world stage. And I wish him all the luck that he can get.
Okay, Abhinav, so this was the first part of the interview, which was a serious part. Now we will move on to the fun part, basically.
I don't really care much for expectations, but let's try.
All right, sir. So the first thing is the most embarrassing moment for you to date.
So, I have had many embarrassing moments in my life, and even in my sports career, I think I had many embarrassing moments in my life, but hard to remember any. But what I learned in my sports career was to always learn to laugh at myself. And that is what happened. That is something that my coaches taught me, was the ability to be able to laugh at yourself. I think one of the embarrassing moments was that once I went to reach the final of an important competition, and I forgot to take my ammunition. So I went on to the firing line without any bullets. And then I just had to ask my neighbor for some.
Okay. The worst joke that you have ever cracked?
I have only good jokes. My jokes are not poor.
So even if it's a good joke, would you like to share it with us.
How do you expect me to just I'm not a comedian. I cannot get you a joke now or like in that instant. It's a little hard for me. Sorry.
Okay, sir. Your first and your favorite crush.
Sport.
Oh, come on. You gotta come up with something better.
It's a great thing. I love sport. Why do you think I was involved in sport for 22 years? I certainly loved it. Otherwise, I would be mad.
We're expecting some actress or anyone.
Told you, don't have expectations.
Abhinav, what is the most craziest thing you tried before Beijing?
No, I went on a commando training course 3 days prior to boarding my flight. And it was a crazy thing to do because, the chances of getting an injury was more than 70%. And I did it because I took that risk, and it was a risk worth taking because it ended up being a very important aspect of my preparation.
We all are looking forward to the biopic on Abhinav Bindra. Will there be songs and dances in it?
I'm not producing the film. I've only sold the rights of my book to Mr. Kapoor. So one of the reasons why it's not been made so far is that I never sign off on such nonsense.
The impression about Bindra is that of a serious, reserved guy who takes part in a lonely sport. That's why I asked about songs and dances.
No, I said that, so I don't think there will be songs and dance. It will certainly be a loosely adapted version of my autobiography, but I certainly hope that there will be no song and dance.
What was the best advice you got between Athens and Beijing?
The most interesting advice, to learn how to detach from outcomes, I think was something which was an advice given, but also an advice imbibed through learning. So that, when I went to Athens, I was very attached to winning, and really, winning for me was very important. The outcome was very important. And when I went to Beijing, I was very detached from the outcome, and I was more really attached to the process of what I had to do. So that was a very important learning and advice that I was.
So, Abhinav, if not a shooter, what would you have liked to become? Was it in sports or something from the academic perspective?
A lawyer.
And finally, Abhinav, is there any confession would you like to have which you haven't made anywhere to date?
Certainly not going to make it on this show.
Okay, Abhinav sir, thank you so much for your precious time. You talking to us, it means a lot to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Good to see you. Bye-bye.
ಇದು ಏಷ್ಯಾನೆಟ್ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತಿ.
ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಏಷ್ಯಾನೆಟ್ ಸುವರ್ಣ ನ್ಯೂಸ್.